Oh, hello. Thinking like everyone is back now. So I posted in the chat just the questions again. We will have like a very brief discussion, maybe asking, a few volunteers to help us answer these questions. So to see what were some of the discussions that you were having. And obviously we have lots of room, so we cannot hear from everyone, but maybe having like volunteers that can say, what are the benefits of doing work with a community engagement center? One of the things I saw is like, it facilitates partnerships. It's like logistically easier. What are some other reasons you talked about?
One thing I heard that was valuable was that it's a space also to keep track of what the community is asking for in terms of partnership. So we don't exhaust communities, we don't replicate our work, but that we're being thoughtful and considerate about what the community has already said they would like to work on with partners.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, right? So they can also keep track of the work that has been done, right, historically, and see what they have heard from the community and what are some things that you can engage with. Excellent. And then again, because we're like running a little bit behind, so what are some of the benefits of like engaging in a particular geography? Maybe someone that would like to share. And that could be that you're engaging in the same city or like in the same neighborhood, but what are some of the good things about that? I think one of the things that I saw is like the ability to create long-term partnerships. That's like one. Anyone would like to share?
Well, I'm trying to weigh a physical space versus a virtual space. And I'm thinking a cafe or a library, and I'm like, I'm just not. So I'd like to know what kind of spaces have people experienced that would qualify as a university center, community center. And was it virtual or was it real? And what would be some of the elements that were in it?
Yeah, and I think that just depends again where you are, right? And a lot of universities are like bricks and mortar kinds of places. So it would be like definitely with having a building and having a place. But these days also they're very much virtual, right? And there's a lot of like also a lot of partnerships that are done virtually and people coming together and creating their own collaboratives as well, virtually. So yeah, that's a great point. And I see that some people agree with that.
I think one of the ways to do it is to also to look at connecting with a variety, just not community engagement centers. And I've been part of the ABCD work with libraries and museums across the country. And it's opened my eyes to looking at building partnerships with a variety of community assets. For example, the University of Maryland School of Social Work has built a partnership with the Enoch Pratt Libraries, which is the library system in Baltimore, to put social work interns in a lot of the branches of their library system. And it's a great partnership. The university students are exposed to ABCD. And you could get into geography discussions. They're placed a lot of times in neighborhoods that most of them have never experienced anything like that. And they bring an ABCD-based knowledge to it, and the School of Social Work is all about it. So I think expanding it to looking at all kinds of community, institutional, agency, nonprofit assets that higher education could build partnerships with, and the benefit of geography is just it makes the community better in a variety of ways and connects all the assets that are there.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your work with the libraries, right? Because it's like a place to provide services for community, doing ABCD work and connecting people. So excellent. So let's go to like the third question again, that's like, as I said, University Neighborhood Partners has been invited to come to a new geography, and that's very much what like Erick is doing, building those partnerships. And then what were some of the things that you discussed that you have to take in consideration when you're moving in a new new geography? And you know, it might be geography, but it could be also just you're starting a new partnership, right? And doing long-term commitments perhaps with that particular space. So what were some considerations?
Could you repeat the question again?
Yeah, so this one, it was question number 3. So what considerations would you take as a community engaged center to expand your reach or geography?
One of the comments that came out in our group were to see who was already working in the area that was being contemplated expanding to see what they were doing, so as not to replicate or duplicate services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great thing. And see like with whom you can create partnerships as well, right? So it would be like as a mapping could be a tool that you could use as well when you are looking into going to a new particular geography or space that might be yeah, just virtual as well. So thank you so much. I hope that again this was like a way of like meeting other people that are interested in higher ed and how higher ed can create long-term partnerships with residents that are valuable and mutually beneficial. So now we're going to have like our presentation, and we will have like, yeah, like about 54 minutes for that. And then, yeah, Kim and Erick will be mostly leading that part. And do you want me to show the slides, or you want to?
I think if Erick wants to do it, you could take a little bit of a break. Erick, would you be okay to share the slides? He's really good at that part, keeping us moving in the technology side, and then I'll get us started. Ivis, I received in my group's feedback that people want more out of those breakout sessions, and that just always makes me feel really good, because it means people want to talk and people want to engage, and I see that as a positive. So I look forward to the conversation at the end of this presentation. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Again, I'm Kimberly Schmit, and I'm here in the beautiful Wasatch Mountains in Salt Lake City. And I am just thrilled to be able to share the work we're doing, but more so to engage you with some of the questions that we have. I am going to encourage you to raise your hands, to interrupt me, to use the chat. Kim and Ivis will help with that, if that's okay, while Erick and I present, but do that. And yes, we will have the slides available. We will make sure that those are available, and keep those questions coming. Okay, so we've been at it 20 years, and I'll explain what at it means here as we move forward, but we're going to start with a 2-minute video. Erick, would you be okay with sharing that video, please? Everybody can sit back and enjoy.
As the University of Utah wanting to focus on engaging underserved communities, but also they recognize the lack of representation of diverse populations and students from the West Side. So as a result, Irene Fisher to do a 1-year survey, focus groups, hundreds of interviews, and as a result of all that feedback, the university made a commitment to establish an office in the West Side.
UNP works by building partnerships between University of Utah faculty and staff and students with community organizations and families and individuals. And so they built those partnerships to help meet the needs of people on the west side of Salt Lake City and kind of across Salt Lake County.
UNP's impact has been enormous, and you could see that directly in the community, actually seeing young people that have been involved in these partnerships now attending the university. So the impact has been tremendous in terms of seeing this pipeline happening from the community into the university.
On any given day, UNP staff is working with faculty and students in their teaching or in their learning or in their research on individual projects. At the same time, every day, staff from UNP is working to create institutional structures at the university that allow for this change to happen continually over time. It's shifting seen in the generational impact of families.
Empowerment is about the redistribution of power. And through partnerships and relationships, I believe that UNP is successful at empowering partners and communities.
Thank you. I think we're all figuring out the technical side. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, and I'll get started with the story. You'll hear it again. So in 2001, the president of the University of Utah took a look at the demographics who was attending the University of Utah relative to who lived in the city in the state. And interestingly, in our west side of Salt Lake City, the neighborhoods on the left side of your screen, a population, a third of the city population of the whole city of Salt Lake City lives in those neighborhoods, and only 23 people were enrolled at the University of Utah, an institution that has upwards of 30,000 students. And the president said, my goodness, what are we doing wrong? What is the university doing wrong? Not what do community members need to learn about the U, but what does the university need to do differently in order to be an option for the community from our west side? Our west side, as Ivis said earlier, is highly marginalized and is a minority community, minority majority at this point. And there is a physical barrier between the two neighborhoods, which is our track system, our I-15 interstate that goes through, and many, many industrial zones that separate these neighborhoods. And to find out that the enrollment was so low was shocking to the University of Utah. So the president said, I need to do something. So what he did is he found Irene Fisher. Some of you may have heard of her. She's the founding director of the Bennion Center, an award-winning service learning center at the University of Utah. She was in retirement, and he said, can you get out of retirement and help me? We're not doing our job here up at the U. And so she said yes. And she said, we're going to do this. We need to do this in a very conscientious, strength-based, asset-based way. And I need a year to do what I need to do. And it was to ask questions and to form relationships in the west side of Salt Lake City. So she went into the neighborhoods and she found a group of 12 individuals that were local leaders, local connectors, and said to them, teach me about the assets of the neighborhood and help me understand what's going on and meet with people to see how the university could be a partner with the west side of Salt Lake City. And so she did 250 conversations. So she was mapping the neighborhood. And at the same time, she was mapping the university to find out who was actually working in the community and how was that work being done. And after that year, and after those 250 conversations and interviews, she learned a few very, very important things. And Eric, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. She learned first that the residents of Westside Salt Lake City had in common with the University of Utah the goal of education. So she figured out what they had in common. The second thing the community told her was, if you want to work with our community, you need to get off the hill. And our university is literally on the Wasatch Mountain, the foothills of the Wasatch Mountains, on a hill, sparkling in the distance. But get off the hill, off the ivory tower, and come be with us. Be in our neighborhoods. Be located here. Find out what it's like to live in Westside Salt Lake and to be in these spaces. And so, and the third thing I'll say really quick is the residents of Westside Salt Lake City said, we are tired of people coming and researching us, our health disparities, our educational issues, our immigration stories. We have leaders, we have ideas, we want a place at the table. We want to share power with you. We want to share resources with you. How about we work together in partnership? And so the University of Utah worked with the Salt Lake City, and the building on the left, we were able to lease for $12 a month. So the city was an asset in this development of university neighborhood partners. They gave us this building, the community and the university renovated it, and we still have a house there. And that's like where I work out of. We also started a partnership center in the middle, you see there, in a gateway community called the Heartland Partnership Center at the Heartland Apartments. And I'll get into more of that in a second. Third thing the university did a few years later is purchased a 10,000 square foot building in the neighborhoods in order to create a partnership center. And that's when we lost the apartment complex building and we moved into that space. So we are trying to answer the community in terms of being located in the neighborhoods. And Eric, you can go to the next slide. And to work in partnership. So what does partnership mean? This is not one-off engagement. This is long-term work we're doing together. And the model that the residents said is, how about we have residents working with people from higher ed and the organizations and institutions that are already located here. The oldest nonprofit in Salt Lake City is located in the west side of Salt Lake City. It's over 120 years old. There are tremendous assets, people who have been doing this work for a very long time. Let's bring them into the conversation. And then these three groups, stakeholders from each of the three groups, got together and went through a planning effort to come up with what areas to focus on. And the community said education pathways, pathways into education, community capacity, and well-being. If we're going to look at access to education and educational reform and social justice, we also need to be looking at the other systems that are connected to that. Look at an interconnected way of building health, both at the university in terms of its need to reform and in the community. Also leadership. We have our leaders. We would like to be able to access more skills and work with people who do this at the university to build our capacity to lead our own community. And then community engaged scholarship. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Okay, Eric, thank you. So here's one example, the Heartland Partnership Center. And actually, I'm going to back up really quick. When Irene Fisher started this work and it was under the office of the president, it stayed under the office of the president. So University Neighborhood Partners has a unique position in an institute of higher ed. We are not in student affairs. We're not in research. We're not in teaching. We're under the department of the president. So we are our direct supervisor is the president of the University of Utah. And our director's title is Special Assistant to the President for Campus and Community Partnerships. So that is indeed a tremendous amount of power that we have being in that space. It's also a relationship that is very important to maintain. And currently we are on our 5th president. And we have to be able to talk to the president about the value of this kind of work in order to continue to be able to do it. Now going to the Heartland Partnership Center, this is an example of the kind of comprehensive partnerships we are building. So here we have a partnership center located in a gateway community for people who are coming to the United States for the first time. And the poverty rates are unfortunately very high, but communities are coming with tremendous cultural assets. They are survivors, they are educators, they are healthcare professionals, and they want to get involved in supporting the building of their community. So in this center, for example, these are the different areas that the community wants to focus on. And for each partnership that is happening, partnership area, there's a university department, a nonprofit involved, and sometimes many, as you see. So at one time in one space, there can be 12 university departments working with 6 nonprofits and maybe 9 resident committee leaders. And this is just one example. The resident committee you see down there. and are the leaders in the neighborhoods that guide the work long term. And I'll talk more about that in a second. Eric? So on the top left, what you see is a professor of nursing with the associate dean of fine arts. And they are mapping out how their work is interconnected with what the residents are asking for and dealing with on a day-to-day basis. For example, childcare with linguistics, with health issues, etc. So they can tackle those problems in an interconnected way. The bottom, you see the youth of Heartland, and now many of which are adults and students at the University of Utah. Are the residents there? The residents are there. Now I'll talk a little bit about the resident committee. In the middle, the larger picture, you see resident committee members that represent different ethnic communities and are seen as the go-to people in their communities for ideas and needs and strengths. And those people come together to guide the Heartland Partnership Center. Also there is a PhD student in linguistics and a professor of social work. And what they are doing is they are sort of flipping the narrative. They were spending so much time answering questions from school districts, healthcare professionals, criminal justice system, policing about what the community needed to learn as new people in the United States. And these systems were saying, these are the resources we have. These are the things that you need to learn in order to be able to be here. And the intentions were right, but the community said, wait, we have our own strengths. We have our own experiences. What if we did trainings for them? So they created the Bridging the Gap trainings, which are now our curriculum at the University of Utah. And they would go out and they would go to different schools. This is one that's at a school. And they would teach the educators and the staff about what education looked like in their home countries or as they went through immigration experiences. And would share their dreams for their families, as well as the skills and techniques and methods that they used that were effective for working with their children. They did this with policing, and they also have done this in healthcare. So this has been fantastic because the educators have a mutual goal of the children succeeding together. And it would bring them into long-term conversations that actually have led to systemic change within the different institutions. Thank you, Eric.
And
go ahead.
I can show my own slides, Eric. I'm just like, slideshow. Okay. So I come to this as a faculty member. So I moved from Chicago to Utah in 2015, and I was like very impressed with the work of University Neighborhood Partners, which is like a big reason that I chose to come to the University of Utah. And I engaged in many partnerships. So like today I will talk about two that I started to engage from the very beginning. So one of them is the Westside Leadership Institute. So this is a course for residents, and it is like takes place during a semester. So it's like a regular semester course, 16 weeks. But again, it is for residents, and it is offered in Spanish and in English. Sometimes the students at the University of Utah, Spanish, especially for the English class, they might take the class with students, so it can look in different ways. But the whole point is that the students work together in a small scale community project that they would like to implement. And actually many of them come with like an idea of what they already like to do, and they join in teams. So it might be like people who are already working on something related to gardening, or parents, and they come to do a project in the West Side. The majority of the residents are actually from from the west side, but nowadays we're attracting people from other places, and many of them to West Valley, which is like one of the reasons, or that, you know, the UMP is like also expanding that way. It is a partnership that started since like 2004, which is kind of like the very beginning also of University Neighborhood Partners. So the local CDC, when the University Neighborhood Partners was like created, this was like one of the partners, and one of the goals of the local CDC is to build community leadership. So this is like how this was like coming to be, from the interest of mostly, again, just like listening to what residents wanted and what like local organizations wanted as well. Just, you know, this is kind of like a boring slide of showing like the program budget, but what I want to say is that, you know, the University Neighborhood Partners pay a faculty, sometimes it's like a buyout to be able to teach this class. So it's like putting resources into this, but also giving local residents some resources, some like mini grants, so they could jumpstart their projects as well. And for, you know, like we have times like childcare and have food. So we actually work to make it possible for residents. And then we also have scholarships for students joining in, but also students do pay a little bit as well. And we have a curriculum, and this is like curriculum that's it is like, look at the part of it is like the planning process of like a particular project. So it starts about, you know, what are some, well, I can go to the maybe the next slide, but it's like framing like what is like a community issue and an opportunity. We do like asset mapping as well. We think about, you know, what is the vision and vision that you have, think about action plans. Many of the things are about like how you create an agenda, how you like make an event, and things like that. So we have like many testimonies, but this is like an example of a resident that clean up like a vacant lot, and she created partnerships by talking to the owners of these, and it was like also the ability to create like a community garden. And there's like many examples in space, but also regarding like education or health or like different campaigns that the residents have done. And something that we call are of like students like alumni, and they are graduates that receive like a certificate from the University of Utah. And of course, in community engagement, always celebration is very important. So having like a graduation, and we have like many graduates. So I think that this slide is a little bit old, but there might be like more than 500 graduates right now, many of the community projects. And many nonprofits have also been started out of this. And also we have a lot of people becoming elected officials or becoming part of boards and commissions. So that's like part of why we're trying to build the leadership, or I should say to nurture it, because there's a lot of like wonderful leaders, but they become like really recognized at the city level and beyond through their work. And another partnership that I'm part of is like a class that I teach, like that is dedicated to the West Side, and it always is about topics that residents care about. So again, UMP, they hear what residents might want or knows about a group. So we have like a steering committee that looks at the projects that we will do, and everything is about looking at the assets of the neighborhood. But being in planning is also about the possibilities, right? So there might be, this case, for instance, is working on the Folsom Corridor, which is like daylighting a river that is now like buried with like dirt. So again, that's a wonderful asset that could be like uncovered, and that we will be uncovered. So usually we also work in partnership with the city. Something that we try to do is like highlight what are the different assets. So we always try to leave also, listen to the residents and create reports, of course, but also leave like physical things with the community. So one project that we were doing is like showing people where to go to the Jordan River Parkway trail, and what are like some of the amenities in the neighborhood that might be a walking distance. So signage have been like something that we have dedicated to do, and also a lot of like placemaking efforts. So a lot of like mural paintings and ways of saying like, this is like this particular neighborhood. So this is actually the first placemaker of the Jordan Meadows neighborhood, which we did in a park. But again, it's just like community comes together to do this, and we do a lot of like community festival and things that are like, again, not only paper, but there are things that are like visible for residents. And those are some of the things that I wanted to share. And I don't know if Erick, you want to me to stop sharing and start sharing again?
So I think we're going to pass the time over to Kimberly.
Yes, so those are just 3 examples of partnerships that UNP has. We have roughly 45 partnerships throughout the neighborhoods that we work in. And one of the things that we all know probably in this gathering is how hard it is to talk about the evaluation and the impacts in ways that funders and traditional systems can understand, as well as fits into what they're looking for in terms of communicating to being able to give support. So we have been at this for some time, and some of the societal impact you see here helps us tell that story. So we ask questions to all of our partners. Again, this is about building community from a strength-based perspective with the university, the organizations, and the residents. And we ask them about, are you more capable of reaching your goals due to this partnership work, this new way of working together? And 72% said they are. This is from our 2021 impact evaluation. Are people more hopeful that there is possibility for better change? 87%. Those are examples of the kind of different ways we're looking at measuring, rather than just counting numbers of people who are involved. While I do think it is quite impressive, there's 400 Westside leadership graduates at this point, and I see them in every partnership that I'm a part of across the valley. It's fantastic. On the right, you see the logos for community organizations that have been born out of partnerships at UNP, like the ones that Ivis shared, as well as the resident committee. So these are actual people who had ideas in the neighborhood who now have their own nonprofits or their own organizations or collectives. And as they move into those spaces, as we shared, so do we. So the partnerships shift as the residents' visions move in new directions. So now we do capacity building for these organizations. It's also important for us to share knowledge and what we're learning. And at the bottom, you see 3 examples. The first one, the anti-oppressive trauma-informed pedagogy, is a curriculum that came out of a partnership with the university and residents. In the middle is actually our annual report, which is full of stories in different languages written by partnerships, sharing what this feels like, what the impacts are for their families, and how the systems at the university are changing. And then also we're very focused on changing research. We know the trials that professors go through in order to be able to do this work in a sustainable way that's valued. So we are working on a community review board that reviews research that happens in these neighborhoods. We've also put together, this is the 2nd edition of guidelines for higher ed for faculty and partners that want to do community-based research. And this was, I think there were 50 people involved in the writing of this, this document. And then of course we started with the whole idea in 2001 that graduation rates were so low. And while that wasn't the only goal, obviously, of UNP's work, we are thrilled that the graduation rates have gone up in tremendous, tremendous, tremendous ways. So I see that impact is generational as well. Okay, Eric, next one, please. And then something we wanted to show that we are pretty proud of is our network map, because our lives are interconnected. Our assets are connected in different ways to different places, right? Our ideas, we move into these different places and neighborhoods all of the time in order just to get through the day, in order to make things better. And so this network map represents actual people in partnerships throughout the west side of Salt Lake City that are interacting on any given day to create a web of connection that actually leads to system change and the bolstering and transformation of all of our communities. So I'd be happy to share this. We have a report on this as well that is, I think, pretty exciting. It's not perfect, but we're trying, okay? And Eric, will you? And so I'm gonna take us to where we're at now and why I'm here. As we all know, Black Lives Matter has changed the dialogue in many of our institutions. So has COVID and the disparities that it has illuminated about how our systems are failing people. And this is very much true in the west side of Salt Lake City and in Salt Lake City and in Utah. And while this was happening, and UNP has 20 years under its belt of doing this kind of work that's relationship-based, organizations are coming to us in tenfold saying, how do you engage with community? We need to do things differently. What can we do differently? And this became a big question to UNP to understand, like, how can we actually support and build the capacity of others to do this work? And so I'm in the process of implementing a curriculum, and I'm working on that right now with partners to figure out just how to do that. And that was because we won the 2020 award, you see, with the Kellogg Foundation for Engagement, the University Award, and that gave us some funding. So then at the same time, it's not like Salt Lake City was enough for our university. To our west is West Valley City, and I'll let Eric take it from here.
Thank you, Kimberly. That's a great transition. So the university is planning on building a hospital in West Valley. And this is ongoing process. This is the headline from last Friday's article at the Salt Lake Tribune. And it's a $400 million facility, as you can see. And this is about 4 to 5 years out. And our president at the time, President Watkins, thought to ask, what is the U currently doing in West Valley City? And she created a task force to evaluate what is the U doing in West Valley, and it wasn't much. And she already had a department, luckily, underneath her office, UNP, that's been doing outreach for 20 years to start looking at the problem. And just to provide some context, so next slide. This map doesn't do justice, but the west side Salt Lake City is over here. West Valley has, or I guess let's do some numbers. The west side of Salt Lake City has around 40,000 residents, while West Valley has 140,000, almost 4 times its population. They call West Valley a bedroom community or suburbia, many suburbs, not as many convening places as there are in the west side, Salt Lake City. And UNP has to now tackle the problem, a question that we'll bring to all of you to help us answer. How do we do ABCD in a whole city? And how do we slow down the university? The university is gung-ho on starting this hospital. And this community has been previously scarred. Right next to the hospital, there's this highway that was built without community input. And another charter school was just built that even closed down 2 elementary schools in the local neighborhood. And so the university really wants to make sure that we get community feedback on the creation of this hospital and wants to make sure that the community has input in how this hospital is going to be built. And how UNP has been doing this process is, how we've been answering this question is with a steering committee that we formed. It has multiple leaders from West Valley. It consists of university partners, city officials, representatives from the education system, and even churches from multiple faiths. And we're all working together. And we currently have around 50 members. And the university is gaining lots of feedback from the steering committee. For example, Dr. Good, who is the CEO of University of Utah Health, and the dean of the School of Medicine came and gave the initial presentation of what the hospital is going to look like, and asked the community members, what would you like to see, and gained valuable feedback there. The Media and Public Relations Department didn't release anything on the hospital until we got feedback from the steering committee, a byproduct of which was the article you saw earlier. They made sure they got feedback on how West Valley would be representative in the media and how the hospital would look like to, I guess, the rest of the state at large. And the steering committee has also helped us in asset mapping, not only media, but gathering spaces and leaders in the community, restaurants, locations or services already in the community that we should partner with, who are leaders that aren't in the table yet. And so they've been really helping us in recognizing that the University of Utah is a guest. And the steering committee are just great ambassadors on helping the U learn about this new geography that we're learning about. And then we're also recognized that we need a space for the residents themselves to speak. The steering committee currently has a lot of leaders, and so we also want places where residents of non-traditional means of power can speak up and talk about their community. And we also formed this resident committee, which Kimberly is going to start talking about.
The resident committee is our way to do this work right. And what we're struggling with is moving at the pace of the community and the kind of time it takes to build the relationships that we have seen to be meaningful. We're trying to create balance. As I've heard McKnight say at one point, if you're going to have a meeting and you're looking to create balance in the room, think 3 to 1, 3 residents to 1 institutional partner. And I've been attending meetings with mayors and presidents of universities and the colleges and so forth, 50 people meetings, and we didn't have a resident committee yet. And so Erick and I just went into high gear about a month ago and said, slow down. We'll talk to you in a second. We need to get the residents organized. And so we have been trying to do that, making sure the work is community driven, and at the same time trying to articulate to the president and to other people the importance of doing it this way. If in fact the mission is to create equity through employment and education for the residents of West Valley City in relation to this hospital. So go ahead, Erick. So we do have, the process has been, we mapped UNP partners. You saw our network. We said, who do you know that lives in West Valley? Who are the movers and shakers in that city? People are moving constantly back and forth and throughout neighborhoods. Help us find those. And we began networking. We also, so that was a way of mapping our own communities. And that is going to be ongoing. On any given day, I'm receiving an email or a phone call from somebody who knows another leader in West Valley that wants to be involved. At this point, we're focusing on 15 people. It's capacity. It's a capacity issue. We would love to have 30 people, but we also don't have the funding completely in place for this. We're also working on the capacity to have more staff and funding for more resident committee members because they are paid for their work. But the groups that we do have is fantastic. They are so engaged and excited. They're different ages. We have young people. We have elders in the community representing different ethnic groups. They come from different neighborhoods because West Valley is so big. We're trying to figure out that we're getting representation from all the neighborhoods until we know where they want to focus and what they want to focus on in relation to the hospital. And they have different interests. Interesting, because we've been at this for a minute, people have multiple positionalities. When we first started the community ambassadors in the west side of Salt Lake, in the first resident committee, which is a picture you see here, we were very clear. We wanted people who were unaffiliated. They were not tied to the university. They were not tied to systems of power, but they were mothers in kitchens, grandfathers that people went to, leaders that were not associated with traditional places of power, but were seen as connectors. And so I thought, let's do that again. But it's a different game. Because UNP's network is so big, and because there has been so much growth in terms of the partnerships impacting people being able to get jobs in systems and at the U, we have a lot of people at the university who are saying, I'm a West Valley resident and I want to be on the resident committee. I'm like, well, you can be on the steering committee because you already have access to power through that space. And they say, no, I want to be represented as a resident. And that has given us great pause, that people get to decide how they want to be represented and what they want to represent when they come into these spaces. So that's been a wonderful lesson to learn. So far, we've had an info session. Again, the university is moving so quickly. They said, we have the president of the university coming. He wants to have lunch with residents. Can you make that happen? And we talked about it. Why now? We need to get to know the residents first before we create that bridge. But we thought, let's eat together. Let's do what we do. Let's build relationships. Let's see if people want to meet with the president. And we had a gathering at a pho restaurant in West Valley, thanks to Erick finding an amazing restaurant. And it was fantastic. It felt authentic. It felt like we had our feet on the ground and relationships were built and cool conversations were had about critical issues. And our first resident committee meeting is this week. Wish us luck. Erick? And just so you know, the resident committee again creates the vision. They teach the systems. They share new ideas. They build the partnerships. They're leading the equity efforts and they're combating gentrification. Their strengths and their worldliness and their skills coming from different places all over the globe are going to help guide how we do this work with the university in West Valley. But it's not easy. So we have a couple questions for you. Go ahead, Erick. I think I'll skip that for time. Yeah, so really it's day to day that we're dialoguing and you all are professionals in this work. So we need some help. We introduced this question earlier, but I'm wondering what it feels like now that you've heard our story. How do you do ABCD in a whole city? Like my success has been in neighborhoods. How do you do it with a whole city? And what are other ways we can slow down the institution as they have that money and they have that, they have the eye and the ear of so much power to do this work and help do it in the way they're asking us to, that allows us to do the asset mapping and the relationship building. So we'd love to open that up to you. Thank you. Or any other questions?
Do you think it would be beneficial? So we're working with a congregation, which is an organization for all intents and purposes. I just thought about from your discourse here just now, if it would be beneficial to use a map, a 2D map with pins to determine the residential locations of the members of this congregation. You all looked at one side of the city and saw that it had an extended volume of people and yet small membership in university, whereas another side of the city, you know, it was the opposite. I'm wondering if that'll work, if I could map the locations of where the members live as opposed to where the church is located and how many members come from that immediate community. Because, you know, if your church doesn't look like your community, it's not a church. It's just a social club. You know, let's be honest here, you know. And the same concepts that apply here applies to the church. Members from the community have to be invited to sit, you know, with the church in different positions and so forth, just like you all mapped out here. What do you think of that concept?
I think I'm smiling because we're kind of going through a similar thing. I think that makes sense, a lot of sense to me, because I am learning from not our congregation, but the communities we work with, that boundaries are fluid, right? Like all those, people live in different neighborhoods, but sometimes they'll identify that they live they belong to one, but they live in another and they work in another. And why can't we do that? That's like what we want for people, to be able to belong and to different places and say what it is. And so, but yeah, we're trying to now get all the addresses of our resident committee and put them across the map, like you're talking with your congregation, to see if that in fact they're representative. And then also demographics. We're trying to do some demographic reports, well, what's the demographic makeup? Are we actually representing that? Do our city councils, or should we be focusing on that? Does the people on the resident committee reflect, the people who go to schools, who are in our schools? That's a good place to get data. I think that makes a lot of sense. That's just my feedback. Ivis, Erick?
Thank you.
I think there was a question. What was it? Can we see it? We can stop sharing.
Yeah, a few questions on the chat. I mean, one of them is about faculty members and how they the guidelines towards tenure and how faculty are discouraged because you need to have publishable work and in a short period of time, and community-based research takes longer. So I think, it's something that departments can do is revise their tenure guidelines. So usually that will be more at the college level, and having senior faculty, obviously with tenure, to be able to advocate for that, and just kind of talking about what is the value and what it brings our community. But it takes a lot of education. It takes obviously doing networking with centers that will also advocate that in order to create change. So I don't have a great answer besides, it's you need to educate about it and find people that think in this way as well, in order to create change and mobilize to be able to change the guidelines and do the value community engagement. And I think it will take a while for that to happen in many institutions, but many institutions as well are taking steps towards making that happen.
And I just paste on that note the community-based research report that we put together just to help with that thinking. That should definitely help, has some very clear guidelines on what maybe departments could be doing from the dean level to the faculty level, as well as what institutions could be doing to support it. We have been able to support our RPT in different ways. One way we got as a community-based scholar to be on that community, so that they would have the knowledge when reviewing people's tenure and their research efforts, and give feedback right there with the other people. So advocacy at that level. And then again, we're trying to, well, that's a little bit different. But if you do have a community engaged center, like Ivis is saying, they can be the advocate for convening ideas and going into systems to look at educating from the dean level up for about those issues. We also have a bibliography on our webpage. I'll put that in a minute. That gives examples of where our community-based research faculty are publishing, because we know that's an issue as well. And then I'm going to post in there our evaluation because that is connected, and you can see how we're trying to get better at talking about how we do this work, talking to systems in the hopes that they shift, but that we can also get the support we need so faculty can keep doing the work. So just give me a second on that.
I'd like to chip in. The thing that I've always been a little bit dismayed about ABCD, wasn't more about economic redevelopment, because I think there's a huge amount of money that's being missed. We asset people's skills, but we don't asset how much cash flow they do every month, how far their car transportation, their housing, the density of their neighborhood, how much added density construction could be done, and how that neighborhood could profit share on economic development. And so it's not only what their personal skills are, but what are their economic wealth is. And the example that I'm working with is a lady calls me from a town in northern New Mexico that's 800 people. She's a rancher, and she rotates her cows every day, and that's sequestering carbon and raising grass-fed beef. She has 60,000 acres, and she wants to redevelop the town. And she said, well, and a bunch of people in town don't really care about agriculture, but there's this huge amount of grasslands all around the area. So they could be building carbon credits, developing the town into be a great place to live, that's sequestering carbon, raising grass-fed beef, but all that has to be thought out. How do you build a better slaughterhouse? How do you cut out the middlemen? So all of that can drive the ABCD planning process, because there's a whole pot of money at the end of it, and you're building a great place to live, and people that want to get away from Silicon Valley and retire in a great place, you're building that quality of community. I always think that's the potential ABCD could be doing. And then you're not asking people for money. You're like, they're like, how can we participate? That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that obviously the economic development is very important. I might have like an example, like from other places, but in Puerto Rico, there's a lot of like, farmers, like cooperatives, and people like having people share products so they can give like boxes to people and sell those and that kind of kinds of things. Just like in Chicago, there's very good examples of like just like business incubators, right? And doing some of that work of like people. Now, like for example, in the Puerto Rican community, we have like something called Mercado del Pueblo, which is like basically like a little, like a space where people have like shops, and there's like micro lending. And people do things that have to do with like, whatever, hair products, food, and all kinds of things. So yeah, definitely we should be doing a lot of the mapping of assets to see what people like to contribute in terms of like making a business. And there's a lot of interest, of course. And we can talk about, now currently, if you go to places there, they only want like the other types of currency as well, things like Bitcoin or Coqui, or just other types of things that people are using inside those spaces as well. So great comments.
I'd love to answer. I think it was. Sorry,
go ahead.
We're out of time. I'd love to answer Merlene's question about any barriers we've been facing. A barrier that we've been facing while practicing ABCD is reaching out to communities that are traditionally secluded or haven't been reached out to before by higher institutions, such as the university. An example is, just for some context, West Valley City, I read a report recently that our elementary schools, our kids are speaking over 100 languages combined. So we have so many different communities and demographics that it's hard to reach out to every single leader of every community. And we just asking parents and asking leaders. I've noticed that every community has their own leaders, their own advice givers that they seek out, and it's been fun meeting all these new people and just connecting them and forming partnerships. I know we're out of time, so thank you.
Nice.
I just wanted to add, Mark Chop had a question about what software did you use to create the network map?
Eric, are you able to, I don't have that information on me. I can get it and email it to the group. And it might be on the bottom of the publication. I'll look in a second here and make sure that you get that.
Yeah, we worked with a university partner to make that, so that wasn't me, but we will make sure to send that out.
I also want to remind folks, Miranda helped us by adding a column to the Google Doc when you first introduced yourself to put your email. So if you'd like to be in contact with others in this group, please add your email to that list.
Oh, thank you. That's a great idea. Thanks, Miranda. So I think that we have reached our time, but if before leaving you can add your email to the Google Doc, that'd be great. Thank you all.
Yep. And I'm also going to post in the chat. I'll send this out to everybody when I send the recording out as well. But just a very, very short evaluation that just helps us when we're planning our next session. We have a few more of these and just gives us your feedback on what you liked, what was your favorite part, what you think could be done better, etc.
Well, thank you all. Bye.
Thanks very much, and we hope you can join us next time.